Thank you, Artur. We shift now to a critical pillar of Brazil's climate leadership, building and strengthening its carbon markets. I'm honored to welcome Annette Nazareth, Chair of Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, who will give a keynote and frame the discussion from our next panel.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a privilege to be here today, back at Columbia University, where I feel like others have noted when they went to Columbia. I'm a graduate of the law school, so it is a privilege to be here to help set the stage for a timely conversation about Brazil's carbon market shift. We meet at a very important inflection point. In the next year, Brazil will move from concept to implementation on core elements of its carbon market architecture, which the world looks ahead to COP30 in Belém. The decisions taken now on governance, transparency, and interoperability will shape not only Brazil's markets, but how global cooperation advances on climate. This is an opportunity to invest in integrity and credibility to drive scale. Carbon markets only work when they are trusted, connected, and deliver real outcomes for people and the planet. That is why the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, the ICVCM, and our core carbon principles exist. Our mission is very straightforward: to define and uphold a clear, credible, quality threshold for carbon credits so buyers, investors, regulators, and communities can have confidence that any credit they buy is backed by robust safeguards and transparent information. We do this through what we call our core carbon principles, or CCPs, a high-integrity standard consistent with other international frameworks, such as the Paris Agreement and CORSIA, that programs and credit categories must meet in order to pass our assessment. The CCP label is an assurance that credit supply has cleared a rigorous bar on quantification, additionality, permanence, sustainable development impacts, and strong governance, including safeguards for indigenous peoples and local communities. There are now 28 carbon project methodologies that have been CCP approved, from improved approaches to forestry and land management, to capturing methane from landfill sites and converting it into energy, from providing clean cooking equipment in rural Africa to destroying ozone-depleting substances from household appliances like refrigerators. The demand for high-integrity carbon credits will continue to grow in the years to come, and Brazil is well-positioned to take a global leadership role and become a major producer of carbon credits. 7 in 10 companies say that investing in carbon credits allows them to take additional climate action that wouldn't otherwise happen, while 6 in 10 say that buying high-integrity carbon credits incentivizes investment in decarbonization. This underscores the role carbon credits play in a comprehensive and credible decarbonization strategy, and companies are already demonstrating a willingness to pay a premium for carbon credits with the CCP label because it gives them confidence. In January 2025, S&P Global found indications of a price premium for CCP-labeled credits ranging from 70 cents to $2 per metric ton of CO2 equivalent, with this premium set to widen in the coming years. This is the time for market participants in Brazil to align with the CCPs and harness this opportunity to access new sources of finance. The carbon market ecosystem extends beyond credit quality, and the world's carbon architecture is becoming more complex, not less. We have domestic regulations emerging, we have Article 6 cooperative approaches under the Paris Agreement, and we have a large voluntary market that is already financing mitigation at scale. Research from Bloomberg and EF estimates that in a high-integrity scenario, the voluntary carbon market alone could be worth $1.1 trillion annually by 2050. If the different systems evolve in silos, we risk fragmentation, double counting concerns, and confusion that can deter capital and prevent the market from achieving its full potential. The CCPs were designed to be interoperable, the connective tissue that allows credits meeting a common integrity threshold to move across systems. That means a credit recognized under the CCPs can potentially be utilized for domestic regulators in compliance systems, acceptable to international cooperation mechanisms, and used by private companies to make a claim, all while anchored in transparent, comparable criteria. Brazil is well positioned to benefit from this interoperability. As a climate superpower with significant mitigation potential across nature, industry, and energy, as we heard this morning, Brazil can set rules that channel investment into activities that are real, durable, and socially beneficial. In practice, this means three things. First, it means aligning market rules with a high integrity threshold so that eligible projects enter the system with quality. Second, ensuring robust market infrastructure, including tracking so ownership is clear and double counting is avoided, particularly where voluntary and compliance uses may intersect. And third, embedding safeguards and benefit sharing in ways that are transparent and verifiable, ensuring that communities are partners and not just beneficiaries. One key to credibility will be aligning international frameworks around a quality threshold that is both rigorous and internationally recognized to lower transaction costs for local developers and buyers who serve both domestic and international demand. Consider the perspective of industry. Companies need clarity and consistency. If a steel or fuels producer in Brazil wants to complement an internal decarbonization plan with high-integrity credits, they need confidence that those credits will be recognized by counterparties and regulators, both domestically and abroad. Using an internationally recognized integrity threshold and label, developed through broad, transparent consultation, can provide that assurance, a practical shortcut for procurement teams and a defensible basis for auditors. For Brazil's regulators, referencing such thresholds within eligibility rules helps ensure that credits used for compliance reflect robust quantification and safeguards. For developers, from bioenergy and industrial efficiency to restoration and reforestation, meeting a clear integrity bar can broaden market access and strengthen investment appetite because investors read that signal as reduced integrity risk. Brazil can draw lessons from economies that have aligned domestic frameworks with widely recognized standards. Examples include the UK government, which has launched its voluntary carbon and nature's market consultation, where they propose endorsing the CCPs as a minimum baseline for integrity earlier this year, and the Tokyo Metropolitan Government in Japan that promotes the use of CCP-labeled credits as part of its new SME exchange launched in March of this year. Simply put, interoperability is a competitiveness strategy. It would enable Brazilian credits to compete on quality, not just price, and it helps Brazilian companies access diversified demand with fewer frictions. It's also crucial that Brazil build an infrastructure that underpins the integrity and interoperability. Utilizing lessons learned from the voluntary market on registry functions, data transparency and standardization can provide a helpful map for building a system that can move, track, and account for credits across markets. We recently concluded our CIWP, Continuous Improvement Work Program at the ICVCM, which brought experts from the capital markets together to identify the carbon market's existing gaps and to propose solutions for moving forward. On safeguards and benefits, credible markets must protect rights. High-integrity frameworks require robust social and environmental safeguards, including respect for free, prior, and informed consent, and credible, context-appropriate benefit sharing. For Brazil, embedding and implementing these elements and ensuring adequate transparency about how benefits flow is crucial. Communities should not have to take integrity on faith. They should be able to see it in the rules and in data and be confident it will be implemented. So briefly, as a former SEC commissioner, I know what's required to build a market, and I would say that here are my recommendations on the carbon markets. First, we need to anchor credit eligibility and disclosure rules to a recognized integrity threshold, so domestic supply is globally recognized from day one. Second, invest in the plumbing, the interoperable infrastructure, the robust tracking, the clear data requirements. All of these allow credits to move cleanly across systems, expanding use cases and the ability of claims to be verified. And third, operationalize safeguards and benefit sharing with transparency. Make it easy for investors, communities, and civil society to see how value and responsibility are shared. So as we look toward Belém, let COP30 be a multilateralism COP, a moment where countries, companies, and communities align around common rules of the game. Brazil has the chance to show that high integrity is the fastest route to high impact. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette. To further explore these themes, we are pleased to welcome our panelists. Paula Kovarsky, co-chair of SBCOP 30, partner at Legend Capital, board member of Energy's Aid, and advisor board for Just Climate. Natália Renteria, Brazil director of Race to Belém. Gautam Jain, senior researcher and scholar of Columbia Center of Global Energy Policy. To moderate, Ricardo Assumpção, partner and chief sustainability officer at EY. Thank you.
Okay, hello, good morning for everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. I feel like a veteran for the third year. So thank you, Marina and Luciana, for the invitation. So, ladies and gentlemen, today carbon pricing and carbon accounting is not a niche anymore. Carbon pricing covers around 28% of the global emissions through 78 active instruments, including 43 carbon tax and 35 emission trading systems. In 2024, last year, these mechanisms raised around $100 billion in revenue. Jurisdictions with carbon pricing now represent about 65% of the global GDP. And yet, despite the momentum that we are, global emissions keep rising. More than 130 countries have announced net zero targets, covering over that 80% of the emissions globally But only a fraction of these countries and these goals are feasible, credible, to reduce emissions. Here is a contradiction. So while carbon price in EU, for example, exceeded $96 per ton, some countries still price the carbon in $1 or less. This massive disparity not only it's not good for the competition, but also drives what we call carbon leakage. Industries moving production to regions with weak policies, exporting pollution instead of reduce emissions. In other words, we are moving emissions around the globe, not truly cutting them. So in Brazil, as you know, we are implementing our regulated carbon market, being one of the most, we are one of the most active players, Paula, in the voluntary carbon market. Brazil is uniquely positioned to become a global supplier of high integrity carbon credits. At the same time, we must design a system that doesn't strangle companies or reduce competitiveness, but rather drive innovation, attract capital, and reward those who decarbonize. At the same time, the private sector are not waiting. More than 2,000 companies represent over 27 trillion in market cap already apply internal carbon pricing to guide investment and strategy. Here we have a dilemma. So we keep with these fragmented national systems and border tax, or we finally have the courage to build a global carbon market that is transparent, equitable, and effective. So a final provocation to start this panel here. Brazil is finalizing the framework to, and at the same time preparing for COP30. This is a great opportunity for us to show our protagonism as a country and that we can lead the debate. To start the discussion, I will start with you, Natália. Thank you very much for being here. So, could you give us an overview about the current legal and policy framework shaping Brazil's carbon market, both voluntary and regulated?
Oh, good morning, all. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. So Brazil is living an exciting moment regarding carbon markets, and as we discussed it today, and to really understand what is happening, let's understand the federal law that was adopted last year. So this law established 3 carbon market types, but 2 carbon market types, with 3 pillars. The first one is voluntary based on projects. The second one is the voluntary based on programs. And the third one, the compliance market. And we have the interoperability, the possibility to really allow carbon credits go into the compliance market. And this interoperability has 2 levels. So the first one is to go into and stay in the compliance market. And the second one is to enter and be authorized to be exported. So the voluntary market in Brazil doesn't rule the issuance of credits. So it's related to market, how we will promote sales. And we have 2 paths. The first one is direct sale, and the second one is organized markets. The developer can choose between both of them. And when we are in an organized market, this credit will be a secured, and this is new for Brazil. We didn't have that before. Regarding the voluntary based on programs, it's the first time Brazilian law recognizes this kind of market, and we have to understand that the law recognizes 2 types. The first one is GRED, as we call that, as a no-market mechanism, and the other one, a market mechanism. The no market mechanism is international donation, and we already have that. But the market one based on carbon credits is really developing now in Brazil. And the third one, the compliance market, is an ETS regime with a cap and trade system similar to the European one. And what is important to understand that a big issue we are discussing now, besides the governance, is how this credit will be accepted and how they will receive corresponding adjustment, which is a hot topic in Brazil right now, and we have not decided how it will be delivered. So just to finish, now we are really discussing implementation, how it will be implemented. And the compliance market is linked to the Ministry of Finance, and forest carbon is linked with Environment Ministry. And the whole system will be fully operated, will be fully implemented in about 5 years. So, as I said, have this approach in Brazil with 2 markets and 3 pillars is quite unique in the world, and it opens many opportunities.
Thank you, Natália. Jumping from regulation, Paula, to businesses. Could you tell us what are the challenges that companies are facing entering the Brazilian carbon market? And what does this signal about their readiness for a regulated system aligned with global trends?
The list is rather long, but let me first say thank you for being here again for the 4th year in a row. And I mean, if I may, congratulations, Luciana and Marina, once again for the magnitude that this event gained over those years.
The fourth edition?
The 4th edition.
Wow, I thought it was the 3rd.
No. So challenges for companies entering Brazilian carbon markets. I think the way to think about this answer is, entering carbon markets all over the world is a challenging thing. Entering carbon markets in a country like Brazil is even more challenging in a way, in a good sense. And the reason to me is because in this particular subject, we have a massive competitive advantage. So the eyes and the scrutiny will always be higher. But the flip side of the coin is, for us to monetize this potential, we have to be very careful. And it's great that you talked before and you explained how exactly Brazil is, trying to develop the mechanisms and the taxonomy and the interoperability. And I think this is, at the end of the day, what will allow, carbon credits to flow. Something that I like to say is that, and maybe currency is not the best word, but carbon is the currency of decarbonization. Carbon is what will allow, at the end of the day, money to flow from, developing countries into not so developed countries. And carbon is what will allow decarbonization investments to happen in places where they're more efficient. So, and I was paying attention to what you said regarding to, the risk of companies going to countries where the regulation is less stringent. I think that's a risk indeed, but there's also the good part of the story, which is companies going to countries where decarbonization is more efficient. And, Brazilian forestry is 46% more efficient than forestry in other countries around the world. I don't have the exact number for agriculture, but I see my friend there, he might have the number. So I would always think about it the other way around. And from a business perspective, I think that's the way we should think about. And that's exactly what we try to do at SBCOP, right? Rather than thinking about the challenges as you pose the question, is thinking about the good examples and leveraging on the good examples. Thinking about what's doable and what's not. So, of course, we would all love the world to be already fully operational under Article 6.2. But Article 6.2 requires a political engagement of almost 200 countries that, unfortunately, I mean, I'm not sure we're living in the best moment from a political standpoint to try in something that, you know, requires 200 countries alignment. And so we said, okay, let's try the bilateral for the very simple reason that 2 is easier than 200. Simple as that. And then we said, but the bilateral still requires the corresponding adjustment, which is a big deal. And then we said, okay, we're left with the voluntary then. But then we see, you know, unfortunately, you know, voluntary markets were trading like $2 billion and is now down to $1 billion. And so the way to scale up is really, in very simple terms, the way to scale up is to take voluntary into regulated and make it happen. So what we try to do is to design a roadmap where we don't necessarily need to be perfect now. We may, and I have a bunch of very nice voluntary good projects that did happen in Brazil and it had very high-profile buyers. So it's possible. But what we try to do is to think about what would be needed so for that those projects can be, between two companies, can be like blessed by the respective countries, the host and the buyer, so that to some extent this can become a bilateral thing. And then from bilateral, at some point it will be global.
Yeah. No, you mentioned we need to monetize the potential for Brazil. That's it. And that's why we are supporting, UI is supporting SBCOP in carbon accounting. Let's jump to you, Gautam. Could you give us maybe an overview how Brazil can learn from other economies in their carbon market and what Brazil can teach as well to the world?
Thank you, Ricardo. Wanted to first start by thanking Tom, Luciana, all the organizers for the invitation. Very happy to be here. That's a good question. You know, what lessons can Brazil learn from others, and what can Brazil teach others? So, as Natália just mentioned, in December, Brazil passed a bill for its cap-and-trade carbon market. Let's start with that, with the compliance market. You know, the bill has passed, the carbon market has been, the law has been approved, but much of the functioning of the market, standards, methodologies are yet to be defined. And this is where examples of other successful markets can be a big help. EU ETS is basically the benchmark or the gold standard. It has an annual trading volume of over $1 trillion already. So that's obviously a good place to look at. You know, obviously, EU did not get there overnight. It took a good 15 plus years to get to the stage where they are. So a lot to learn from that. There are things like phasing in different sectors that they eventually have mastered, in the sense they start with free allowances for companies, combined with very strict emission rules, reporting rules. This is good because it allows companies to gradually phase into the market. Similarly, there's been an issue with the volatility of carbon prices, and usually on the low side, but the carbon price can be a problem either when it's too low or too high. When it's too low, it's not doing the function it's supposed to do. When it's too high, it can, you know, there can be political backlash. So you need to manage the volatility of carbon prices. So after several unsuccessful attempts, in the fourth phase, EU has successfully managed to use what they call MSR, or the Market Stability Reserve Mechanism, with which they control the supply of allowances in the market. So these are examples that Brazil can learn from. The timeline that you indicated right now for implementation is 5+ years. I would think there are examples there that can help hopefully accelerate the timeline, because don't forget, CBM gets kicked in next year, and that impacts all countries. So that's on the voluntary side. The compliance side. Let's move to the voluntary side. As Paula just mentioned, in voluntary markets, Brazil has a ton of experience. Brazil is widely regarded to be the country with the most potential for nature-based carbon credits. It already supplies close to 10% of the credits in the voluntary market. However, the share of the revenue it gets is only 2%. So clearly something is not right. The pricing is low. So what you need for that is, again, touching upon what Paula just said, is we need a very strong regulatory framework for the entire voluntary carbon market. And this is necessary not just on the supply side for project developers, but also on the demand side for companies and other buyers to know what is allowed and what is not allowed when they buy a carbon credit. So you need a complete regulatory framework that covers supply side, demand side, market side. And this is where other countries are sort of building up. This is still new for most of the world, but there are some that have already developed reasonably robust regulatory frameworks. Annette had mentioned UK, that's one, Japan, Australia, France. So there are examples there that can be used for that. So this is what Brazil can learn from others, but Brazil has a lot to teach others as well, because, again, Brazil has a tremendous experience with REDD+ projects. One of the things that they have done pretty well is integrating project-level activities with the national accounting system. Now, this may seem relatively trivial or simple, but believe it or not, many countries are struggling with that. Even Article 6 hasn't quite figured this out yet. So this is one place that can be helpful, where Brazil's experience can be helpful. Another place is the Amazon Fund. Basically, it's a results-based payment system, which is a pretty good framework that others could use and learn from. Then there is Brazil's long history of partnership with the indigenous communities, including having or allowing for indigenous territories in the Constitution itself. This is, again, another place where carbon markets can become or sort of integrate more rights-based approach in there. So all these things are helpful. Finally, one final point I'll make is the global stability, the nature-based stability committee that Brazil has is a good one for a model for others, both for advocacy for when you approach government, as well as for self-regulation.
Great, great. I completely agree with you. We need a strong framework. This is a challenge. And speaking about challenge, Natália, what are the main structural challenges, the next step to scale reforestation in Brazil and create or include that in a mitigation framework?
Brazil is a key actor in the restoration native industry. And we have thousands of degraded and deforested areas. We have national targets to achieve in our NDC regarding restoration. And we have also an opportunity, more than an environmental one, we have an economic opportunity for Brazil. We can really solve, or we can touch problems as food security, biodiversity, and we can really improve income for rural population. So we have all pieces to do that, but why we are not doing that? It's at scale. So to answer that, I believe we have to understand 3 phases regarding restoration in Brazil. So the first one, we had small projects and philanthropic capital. The second one that I believe we are living, and it's still happening, we can see the emergence of specialized companies in doing that, and projects are private-based. And the first phase, I believe, are coming is the need to unlock public areas. If we not unlock public areas, we will never achieve the scale needed. So for me, really, reforestation in Brazil is gaining momentum, but we have to solve this financing issue, and Maria, and today we already discussed that with Maria Annette. She really explained that very well, because we have capital on the table, but we have to deploy it, and guarantees is still a problem. So it's a key problem today. And then the other problem is really to unlock public areas. Unless we do that, we will never achieve scale.
Oh, great. Yeah, you mentioned scale, and you mentioned successful cases as well. It's very important to inspire and to show that it's possible. And speaking about successful cases, Paula, let's come back to you. From a SBCOP perspective, could you please share successful case about companies in Brazil that are engaging with the voluntary carbon market today? Things are already happening in Brazil today.
Yeah, I think I would probably talk about groups of companies. So we have, and I mean, sometimes when you say carbon markets, people think first on forestry, right? I think that's the kind of first thinking. So I'll talk about Monbec, Regreen, and you know, Net Zero from France, which is doing like biochar, which is a little bit more of an innovation on top of forestry, which is amazing. The guys from Belterra, who are going beyond the reforestation into building the sustainable economy that will keep the forest alive later. So this is a very interesting group of companies that are doing very high integrity, I would say, emphasis on very, you know, and they are selling to top-notch tech companies. So I think that's a great example of how doable it is, right? And then again, studying what they've done and the process is something that we try to do to say, here's how we scale up. And with the idea of the jurisdictional that can sort out the land title thing, I think we can definitely move and scale. Then there's the group of energy companies. And then you have, you know, a series of developing biomethane projects in Brazil, from landfill like Horizon and other agricultural biomethane developments, which are also evolving. These guys are doing voluntary market, but I would say corresponding adjustments in the energy world. I think it's less of an issue than corresponding adjustments in the forestry world, in Brazil at least for the time being. And I hope these guys may be the ones unlocking the process, you know. And so one of the things that we looked for in the SBCOP initiative was to say, okay, we'll look at the voluntary deals, but those voluntary deals are already trading in regulated spaces, call it, or regulated markets, you know, or regulated frameworks, because this is another step of assurance. This is another step of, you know, building reliability so that we can move to the next round and do it on Article 6.2 or 6.4. So that's what we're trying to build. And then a very key element for that to succeed is the whole story of carbon accounting. Again, back to I'm repeating myself, but carbon is the currency. Every currency needs an accounting system. It took like, I don't know how many hundreds of years for the financial accounting system to be where it is today, since someone decided not to exchange goods and use coins, right? So I think one of the biggest mistakes that we can make is try and start with 100% perfect thing. I think we need to start with an almost perfect, get it going, test, and improve. And then, you know, if we succeed on that, if we succeed in creating this carbon accounting methodology at the product level that allows, and I mean, the beauty of going to the product level is that, you know, you're going to know what's the carbon intensity of whatever you're buying, from energy to a car to goods, so you can understand what you're doing. At some point, I think, pay for the lowest carbon intensity, and then companies that will have to report that in their balance sheets, they will say, okay, I buy 10 cars with XCI, 10X is it's the booking of my account, of my carbon in my balance sheet, and then countries can use the same, and we may eventually get rid of the CBAM by, you know, making sure the system works worldwide. So those are the two main initiatives of SB Corp. Transactions, building on experience and good projects, look ahead, be ambitious but not try to be perfect, and at the SB Corp level itself, 100% full support to carbon accounting initiatives.
Now, great to hear from you, Paula. And carbon account, I believe, is sometimes the blind spot of the business, but it's a so important topic and a risk. Going back to you, Gautam, where do you see the biggest risk to integrating carbon markets internationally, globally?
So yeah, before talking about the risk, I think it's important to first understand why it's necessary to integrate markets globally, just so that we are all on the same page. First, to create an efficient market where you can have proper price discovery, it needs to be deep and liquid. And that you can achieve only with an integrated, globally integrated carbon market. Second is a more fundamental reason. If you think about why economists are in favor of a global carbon market, it's because that's the way to achieve decarbonization at the lowest cost possible. Because jurisdictions that can produce, reduce carbon emissions at a low cost can sell those to jurisdictions where the cost of reducing emissions is high. So that's how you achieve low cost, overall low cost to decarbonize and achieving NDCs for all countries. Now let's talk about the risk. I think this touches upon a little bit upon what Annette was talking about earlier, which is the integrity of carbon credits. There are regulatory gaps between countries. There are different methodologies for additionality, permanence, different MRV approaches that are used. So what that means is the environmental integrity of credits vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And you have the risk of mixing low-quality credits with high-quality credits, depending on which jurisdiction you're dealing with. So that's one risk. A challenge is the legal characterization of the credit. In the sense, to integrate, they need to be sort of thought of as the same unit, but they're not. In some jurisdiction, a carbon credit is a financial instrument. In some, it's a commodity. In some, it's an intangible asset, a property right. So that makes it a big challenge to integrate markets.
Great, thank you. We are almost in the end of the panel. We have less than 8 minutes, so we need to be quick in this final round. Natália, in Brazil, subnational governments are also playing a key role in carbon markets. Can you give some examples of good business case and maybe go back in the jurisdictional carbon market initiatives?
Thanks. So first of all, let's understand what is GRED programs. So they are the improvement of public policy implementation to tackle deforestation and land degradation. It's important we understand it's completely different from project level carbon market. So they are led by states which works closely with social actors, and together they will decide, they will agree, and they will decide a jurisdictional strategy with benefit sharing. So this is the basic elements of a jurisdictional program. And we can say the carbon credits issued, they have high integrity because there are no land issues. They are aligned with government targets and NDCs, at least in Brazil, we are like that, and they follow a high standard. So these three elements can guarantee this high integrity. So we have an important activity in Brazil right now regarding jurisdictional programs, and many states are developing these programs. And Tocantins, I can give you this example. Tocantins is quite advanced, and we will have credits at the beginning of next year. Will be really a first of this kind in the world, subnational program regarding subnational programs. And to replicate those good results, the campaign Rest Belém was launched. And the idea is really to combine scaling jurisdictional action with attracting international and private capital. And we really want to promote this connection between credits and buyers. So I can give you some lessons. We can achieve new models like jurisdictional ones, but it's important to understand that we can't have new results by doing the same things. And jurisdictional programs, it's a new way to go.
Thank you, Natália. So we have less than 5 minutes now. Paula, last question in 2 minutes, and maybe your closing remarks. What practical strategy are companies already adopting to participate in the Brazil's regulated systems?
I'm not sure companies are adopting strategies. I think companies are more than ever more supportive to developing a framework that allows them to do so, and that's how to go about it. And again, back to the carbon accounting and the fact that carbon is the currency, and we need to attract capital. You know, the problem with deforestation is that not only we need to attract capital, but we need to attract capital to the right location. And so the money needs to flow. And so I think at the end of the day, carbon markets are, you know, scalable carbon markets are the solution for so many issues. And when you think about, I mean, finance people and engineers, and I am one, so I'm happy to, you know, shoot on me, but I mean, we are Cartesian people. We like to look at a screen. We like to see what's the forward curve. We like to look at the forward curve and run our Monte Carlos and say, here's the risk. And while we don't have that, people are scared, and they don't know how to value. And if they don't know how to value, they put a high value or a high risk or a high cost, and interest rates go to the roof, and so on and so forth. So to me, if I were to leave, you know, one message to kind of make the funding for decarbonization more fluid, that's definitely carbon markets.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much. Gautam, your final remarks in 30 seconds.
So what I would say is, obviously, we're heading into COP30, hosted by Brazil. I think that Brazil has a very important role, and in some ways it's a good thing that this COP is happening in Brazil, because of all the experience it has in carbon markets. This is one of the key goals of this COP, is fully operationalizing Article 6, and no better country for this to happen than Brazil. Ideally, we would like to see Article 6, 6.2. There have been a few deals, a couple of deals that have been fully closed, 90 plus have been signed, so there's been some progress. 6.4 is where there has been very little progress or any actual implementation so far. This is a place where Brazil can help create a global carbon market.
Thank you very much, Gautam. Natália, 30 seconds for you. Your final remarks here.
I invite all of you to understand more about jurisdictional programs. We have a real chance, a real example in Brazil, and we can really unlock many opportunities.
Great. So Paula, Natália, Gautam, thank you very much. We touch very important points here from how to monetize the potential, from how we need a strong framework. We have COP30 ahead, and all these discussions probably we're going to see some end, and I hope good ends for Brazil. Thanks so much.